Ever feel like, you're kind of stuck, like you're just going through the motions and life is like passing you by?
Yeah, that autopilot feeling.
Totally. And that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive into Cory Allen's Brave New You. It's all about shaking things up.
Oh, I love that book. His insights are so practical.
Right. You've probably heard of him. He's worked with like over 500,000 people.
And meditated daily for 25 years.
Yeah, 25 years. That's wild. Plus, he's shared his advice on his podcast and even reached over 100 million people online.
So he knows what he's talking about.
For sure. And in Brave New You, he really gets into how to like break free from those ruts and actually design a life you love.
It's not about, just thinking positive thoughts. He starts with something much deeper, shifting your perspective.
Which sounds kind of simple, but it's actually really powerful.
It is. Because our brains are literally wired to focus on problems. It's like a survival mechanism.
He has this great analogy in the book about like when you're low on cash, all you see are price tags everywhere.
But when you're in love, the whole world is full of love.
Same world, totally different lens.
Exactly. It just shows how our thoughts really do shape our emotions, which then drive our actions, our experiences, everything. It's like if you're constantly telling yourself, I'm not good enough,
you're going to show up differently than if you believe in yourself.
100%.
So then how do we actually make that shift from like negative autopilot to consciously creating a life we love?
Well, Alan digs into how a lot of our struggles actually come from subconscious fears and insecurities.
Ooh, the stuff we're not even aware of.
Exactly. And they can really mess with our relationships too.
Oh, for sure.
Like imagine your partner comes home from work in a kind of grumpy mood. Our automatic reaction might be to get defensive.
Oh, totally. What's wrong with me?
Exactly. Because we're instantly creating a story about what their mood means. A story that's probably more about our own insecurities than their actual feelings.
It's so easy to fall into that trap.
It is. But Alan suggests hitting the pause button before reacting.
Give yourself a second to breathe.
Yeah. That pause lets us challenge those mental narratives and choose a different response.
Instead of just going with that knee-jerk reaction.
Right. And that's where his first big takeaway comes in, shifting from I have to I get to.
Oh, I love that one.
Instead of, ugh, I have to go to work, it's I get to use my skills to contribute and earn a living.
It sounds so simple.
It does. But try it. That subtle change can create a huge shift in your energy.
Totally. I've been playing with that one myself, and it's wild how much it can change your whole experience.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah. He also talks about how we get stuck in these outdated patterns. Like, how do we even recognize those in the first place?
It's about listening to those subtle cues. Like, does something feel off? Are you having to force it? He even suggests actually asking yourself, does this feel off and do I have to force it?
Oh, I like that. Get curious about it.
Yeah. Our bodies are sending us signals all the time. We just need to slow down and actually pay attention.
Like when you're in a job that used to light you up, but now it feels draining.
That's your cue to examine those feelings.
Probably something's off.
And once you've kind of identified those feelings, Alan suggests this really powerful exercise. Write those challenging thoughts down.
Okay, see, that's the thing I always thought was a bit, woo.
I know, right?
But he explains it in a way that makes so much sense.
It's not just journaling your feelings, it's about getting those thoughts out of your head so you can see them objectively.
Like you're untangling a giant knot?
Yes. You're pulling out a tangled mess of yarn and finally seeing each individual thread.
And then you can be like, oh, that's what's been tripping me up.
Exactly. He even suggests going back to what you wrote a few days later.
Give it some space.
Yeah, because then you can really see those thoughts for what they are. Just thoughts, not facts. And it's amazing how much power those thoughts actually lose when you can kind of separate from them. Separate them from that immediate emotional charge they have.
Yeah, totally.
And speaking of separating, Alan gets into this whole idea of mental stories that we tell ourselves about other people. Those narratives that are like way more about our own assumptions than actual reality.
Oh, you mean like when your partner comes home kind of grumpy and you immediately spiral thinking you did something wrong?
Exactly. He calls those self-fulfilling prophecies.
Oh, interesting.
And it works both ways too. Like if you're constantly assuming the worst, you might actually act in ways that bring that outcome about.
So you're saying our thoughts can like actually shape our reality?
Absolutely. But the good news is that we can consciously create positive self-fulfilling prophecies too, right?
Yeah.
It's really just a matter of shifting our focus from what we don't want to what we do want.
Okay, I love that. It's like manifesting, but for like our everyday lives. I'm already feeling lighter just thinking about it. But what about those times, though, when you're trying to actually go for something new, like a goal or a dream, and that inner critic is like, you're not ready, or like, what if you fail?
Oh, I know that voice so well. Right. Alan talks about how those self-limiting thoughts are often rooted in like our primal desire for safety.
We're hardwired to avoid risk.
Our brains are, yeah.
Whoa.
Even if it means like staying stuck.
Right, yeah.
Here's that one line I love. He says, safety is in the known. Growth exists outside of what you already know.
So we have to get a little bit comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. And sometimes that means getting comfortable with discomfort,
It's so true.
He uses the example of David Bowie, like constantly reinventing himself throughout his career.
Oh, that's a good example.
But Bowie was all about embracing change.
Yeah.
And pushing those creative boundaries, even if it felt risky.
Okay, so get a little comfortable with the unknown. I like that.
Yeah.
But what about overthinking? Because that can be its own kind of stuckness,
Absolutely. Alan talks about how overthinking is like having this like super detailed map, right? But then like refusing to trust your own internal compass.
You're too busy analyzing to actually move.
Right. He even says overthinking makes us get in our own way. Don't waste energy fighting with yourself about questions to which you already know the answer.
It's so true. We can overanalyze things to death. He's saying it's more about trusting your intuition.
Yeah, that gut feeling.
That just knows the way.
Yes. And honestly, sometimes the best way to like silence that overthinking is to just take action.
Just do it.
Even a small step forward can like break that paralysis and give you more information to work with.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of getting out of our own way, he also has a whole section on self-consciousness. And that feeling like that you're being constantly watched and judged?
The spotlight effect.
Yes.
It's like we all have this imaginary audience judging our every move.
It's the worst. And then he says something so liberating. He's like, everyone else is just as self-centered, so they're probably not even paying attention anyway.
That's true.
It's like a permission slip to just like stop people-pleasing and focus on what actually matters to us.
Exactly.
Which I love. And that actually ties into his whole point about the difference between happiness and fulfillment.
Yeah.
Because happiness can be so fleeting, like it's dependent on these external circumstances. But fulfillment, that comes from actually living a life that's aligned with our values and purpose.
Totally.
And that meaning. We have to create that for ourselves, which is kind of cool when you think about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's empowering.
And it makes it so you're not always searching for it externally.
Exactly. And then he talks about these synergistic connections. And those are like relationships that leave you feeling like energized and inspired.
Yeah, I love those.
It made me think about those conversations where, you walk away and you're like buzzing with ideas.
Yes. I'm like tapping into some kind of like universal vitality.
Ooh, I like that, yeah.
Right.
Ooh.
He compares it to like the feeling you get after a really great podcast conversation where like everyone just walks away feeling super inspired and energized.
Oh, I love that.
Right.
Okay, so how do we get more of those in our lives? He suggests that we should be curating our social circle with the same intentionality that like an art museum curator selects pieces for an exhibition, which I thought was brilliant.
I love that analogy.
So good, right? So surround yourself with people who lift you up and inspire you.
Yeah, because think about it. Those relationships, they can have such a profound impact on our thoughts and beliefs and behaviors. Even,
Oh, for sure.
like, think about if you were to spend a year immersed in another culture, you'd probably start picking up their language and customs.
You totally would.
The people we surround ourselves with, they have that same power to shape us, whether we realize it or not.
It's like that saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly.
So true.
Yeah.
So how do we know if a relationship is actually giving us energy or draining it? He talks about upward, downward, and synergetic energy flow. So what does that actually mean?
Okay, so think of it like this, right? Upward flow is when you're receiving more energy than you're giving,
Okay.
which, can be kind of draining for the other person.
Right. Downward is like the opposite. It's where you're constantly pouring yourself out. And then synergetic, that's like the sweet spot.
Gosh.
It's that balanced, reciprocal exchange where everyone benefits.
Okay, so you want to aim for that synergetic flow.
Exactly, yeah.
And sometimes we need to set boundaries to protect our energy, even with people that we care about.
Yeah.
He even calls them like accidental energy vampires.
It's true. Sometimes people don't even realize they're doing it.
Right, exactly.
And it's not about blaming anyone. It's just about recognizing that we have a limited amount of energy to give.
Yes.
And it's totally okay to be mindful of how we spend it.
Right. You got to protect your energy. It's precious. Okay, so this brings us to like the tough stuff. What about those relationships that are like clearly unhealthy? You know, the ones that just leave you feeling completely depleted and drained.
Yeah, those are tough. And, Alan doesn't shy away from this at all.
He goes there.
Yeah. He acknowledges that leaving unhealthy relationships can be one of the hardest things that we ever do.
Right.
But, 100%, yeah.
He emphasizes that, like, prioritizing our well-being is essential.
You have to put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Exactly. Like, we can't pour from an empty cup.
So true.
Yeah.
And how do you navigate that? Because that is so hard.
He suggests being open in your communication, like setting really firm boundaries.
If you can.
Yeah.
And if you need to, like, walking away from a relationship that's no longer serving you, even if it's really painful, even if it's hard.
Even if it's hard.
But it's about choosing yourself.
Yes.
Even when it's difficult. Oh, man.
And sometimes that's like the most courageous act of all.
It really is.
Choosing yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so shifting gears a bit, because I found this really interesting. Alan also dives into the power of our words.
Oh, yeah.
And he talks about how the average person speaks something like 7,000 words a day.
A lot of words.
And he's not just talking about like conversations with other people, but that inner monologue too, the one that's constantly running in the background.
Right, like what are you saying to yourself all day long?
Exactly. And he actually calls it a form of hypnosis. And I thought that was so interesting, like shaping our reality, influencing how we show up in the world.
It's like you're constantly affirming things to yourself, whether you realize it or not.
Yes. And so it's like, be mindful of that language.
Totally.
Both internally and externally, because like, are we speaking to ourselves with kindness, with encouragement? Or are we constantly, criticizing and tearing ourselves down?
What's that inner voice saying?
Yeah.
And how do we even begin to change that? It can feel so automatic.
Right, like it's on a loop in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Alan talks about mindful and authentic communication. He says even like small, kind words can make a huge impact.
I love that.
And that's both on ourselves and the people around us.
It's true. Words have so much power.
They really do.
So how do we do that then? Like, how do we change that inner dialogue?
Well, he emphasizes like mindful and authentic communication, and then he actually introduces this idea of deep speech, which I thought was fascinating.
Oh, tell me about that. I don't think we got to that.
Yeah, it's like speaking from a grounded place, like from your chest, so you're conveying this like calmness and clarity.
Oh, interesting.
He suggests imagining like that your words are coming from your heart center, rather than your head.
Oh, I like that.
It's about aligning our words with our intentions and like speaking our truth from a place of authenticity and compassion.
Ooh, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Okay, so he also talks about, and this is something I always struggle with, the Buddhist concept of impermanence.
Oh yeah, that one's a biggie.
It is. The idea that everything is temporary, like, I know it's true, logically I get it, but to really embody that, it's tough.
It can be such a challenging concept.
It is.
But like also so incredibly liberating.
I can see how that would be freeing, yeah.
Right, like think about it. If everything is temporary, if nothing lasts forever, then we don't have to cling so tightly, right?
To things, to outcomes, yeah.
To our own identities even.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right.
Yeah.
And he has this incredible visualization where he asks you to like picture yourself as a window.
Okay.
And like instead of that tension, taking root in you, it just kind of passes through.
Oh, wow. I love that visual.
Right.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful metaphor for like learning to detach from our emotions a bit, to observe them without judgment and to allow them to like flow through us without, us getting stuck.
So good, because it's so easy to get like wrapped up in them, right? And we lose perspective.
Oh, totally.
So how does understanding that impermanence, how does that actually help us in our daily lives?
Well, for one thing, it can really help reduce the grip of those negative emotions, especially like tension and anxiety.
Oh, for sure.
Because we can just recognize that those feelings, they're temporary, they will pass. It can be incredibly empowering.
Yes. It gives you that power back.
Exactly. It allows us to like ride the waves of our emotions rather than getting, swept away by them.
I love that, ride the waves.
Yeah.
Not get swept away. Okay, so he also talks about the importance of like redefining ourselves regularly, breaking free from those limiting beliefs that we have about ourselves that keep us, stuck.
It's so easy to get trapped in those.
It is. And he uses those examples, like he talks about Miles Davis and Taylor Swift even.
I love that you use those two examples.
I know, right? Talk about ranging across the decades. But it's true, they've both like totally reinvented themselves throughout their careers.
And they've been so successful at it too, because they were willing to
take risks,
embrace the change, right? Refuse to be like defined by what they had done in the past.
It's about evolving, right?
Exactly.
And being open to those new possibilities and allowing ourselves to do the same.
Yeah.
And he actually talks about recognizing, he calls them portals.
Ooh, interesting.
Right. And those are like those moments when your intuition is saying like, hey, something needs to shift here. Like it might be time for a new direction.
Those gut feel.
Yes, exactly. Have you ever experienced that where you're just like, something's telling me I need to make a change?
Oh, all the time. Yeah.
It's like a knowing.
And those portals, like, they can show up as synchronicities, gut feelings, those like signs from the universe that are kind of guiding us towards, these new opportunities for growth and fulfillment.
That's about trusting those nudges.
Yes, exactly. Even if they're leading us in directions that we totally didn't expect.
Because our brains like to have it all figured out.
Right, yeah. We love a plan.
We want that plan.
But sometimes the best adventures are the unplanned ones.
So true.
Yeah.
And you have to have that self-trust to be able to navigate those portals effectively.
Yeah, self-trust is huge. It's essential for navigating like all of life's challenges with resilience and grace.
It's like that foundation you're working from.
Exactly. It's built through facing those uncomfortable situations, staying true to ourselves, and like learning from those inevitable setbacks, right? Because they're going to happen. It's really about like believing in our ability to handle whatever life throws our way.
I love that. It's so empowering.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to get caught up, especially in the age of social media where it seems like everyone has it all figured out.
Oh, the highlight reels, right?
Yes, and everyone's like living their best life.
But nobody actually has it all figured out.
It's so true.
Journey, not a destination. And it's about being kind to ourselves along the way.
Totally.
Quieting that inner critic, embracing the process of becoming.
Love it. So good.
Yeah, so.
On that note, Cory Allen's Brave New You, everyone. Check it out. If you're feeling stuck, if you're ready to like dish that autopilot and write a braver story for yourself, I cannot recommend it enough.
It's full of such great tools and insights to help you shift your perspective, embrace those changes, and actually create a life that's like both meaningful and fulfilling.
Love that. And if you're looking for like one little takeaway from our deep dive today, here's a thought. What's one small shift you can make today, right now, to step into a braver, more authentic version of yourself?
Ooh, I like that.
Something to think about.
Yes, love it.